My name is Jessica Keller, and this is my son, Travis. Travis was born with Pyruvate Kinase Deficiency, a rare blood disorder that prevents his red blood cells from creating energy. We live in Boscombe, New Hampshire, and have also lived in Massachusetts and Rhode Island throughout the last 15 years. Travis has been seen by different teams of doctors in all 3 states throughout the years. I consider us to be fortunate to have lived within a few hours of Boston throughout his treatment and for his doctors to have known each other and collaborated easily. Travis is my firstborn, and the doctors knew something was wrong within a few hours of birth. Travis was severely jaundiced. One would say he was orange. Yellow was not even on the spectrum. He spent the first 11 days in the NICU and received his first transfusion at 9 days old. When he was discharged, he was monitored closely by his primary care doctor, who was in constant communication with the pediatric hematology team at Tufts Medical Center in Boston. Babies have a lot of doctor's appointments, even when they're healthy. So I didn't realize how severe his condition was. I didn't know what he had. His first visit with his hematologist was at about 2 months old. Dr. Rosenfield thought she knew what he had because she was treating another patient with the same rare condition. We are lucky that Travis's first hematologist was familiar with Pyruvate Kinase Deficiency and had a plan on how we would manage his care. I was given a 1.5-page printout from Medline Plus and advised to carry it around because most doctors are not going to be familiar with this disorder. That piece of paper came in handy, but it still didn't always educate staff to the severity of his condition and what they had to do to monitor his current state. Travis's official diagnosis for PKD was when he was 6 months old. He had a hemolytic crisis, 4 months post-transfusion. I had been feeling unwell that afternoon and woke up from a nap with him having a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I took him to the local ER. We explained Travis's condition as we checked in, and again when he was triaged by the triage nurse, and then waited for hours in the waiting area. We were finally taken back to a room and explained his condition and what had to be done for the 3rd and 4th time. Labs were finally drawn. While waiting for results, a phlebotomist came back into his room to redraw his labs because there was an error in the testing. I stopped and asked what his hemoglobin was, and she had to get a doctor to give me that information. When the doctor came in, we were informed that his hemoglobin was 5.6. And I informed the doctor that they needed to speak with the on-call pediatric hematologist at Tufts Medical Center, now. It was determined that he needed immediate care, but the local hospital was not specialized enough to care for him. His regular Boston Hospital's children's unit was at capacity, so we were given 2 options: to go to Boston Children's Hospital and be cared for there, or transfer to Lowell General Hospital for the night, and then be transferred again in the morning to Tufts Medical Center. It was late and I was tired, so we opted to go to Boston Children's and not worry about a second transfer. His hemoglobin was so low they had to draw labs from his head. Luckily, they were able to get enough to also send a clean sample of blood to Stanford University. Because it was so long since his last transfusion, the sample was mostly comprised of his own blood, making it easier for the scientists to identify the pyruvate kinase deficiency within the sample. The first year of his life was difficult. We were new parents, didn't know what was going on or what to expect next. Receiving a diagnosis that your child has a rare, incurable disorder can feel like a bomb being dropped into your hands. I encourage all parents to look at it more like a hand of cards. Your child is dealt. You're not going to fold and try for a new hand, but you can make decisions to change out some cards in their hand, resulting in the best hand possible to move forward. But first, breathe. Your brain is running like crazy, going through different scenarios of what ifs, and what is my child's life going to look like now? Just breathe and slow down. I delivered Travis by C-section and was recovering from my own major surgery. I remember sitting there in my hospital bed thinking of how my parenting plans would be changed by this unexpected curveball. And then a few days later, I realized that nothing was going to change. I still wanted to raise a respectful person who would contribute to the world around him. I continue to have realistic, age-appropriate expectations for Travis, just like I do my other 2 children. It is difficult to watch our children go through treatments and tests. It's natural to want to make it all better in any way we can. But in the end, I knew that wouldn't be helpful to anyone, especially Travis. It is important to remember that your child is still the same person they were before you knew about their diagnosis. When Travis was learning to walk, I would follow him around with his IV pole so he could still experience that freedom as he learned. I may have scared the medical staff a few times. He was fast. But we worked together, and they gave him extra IV tubing to help give him freedom. It was helpful for me to realize that his condition is manageable. It isn't terminal, and it isn't a death sentence. When parents learn that their child has a chronic condition, one of the biggest changes you face is that you add an additional title to what you are: care manager. As you learn to be a care manager, your child is watching you. They recognize your reactions and are learning how to manage their care. This is critical. To help in this new role, especially when your child has a rare disorder, educate yourself with accurate, up-to-date information and share that information with your child's medical team. Ask questions. Be an active participant in their care and the decisions being made. It's okay to use common sense as you learn more information. Make your own hypotheses or conclusions based on the information you gather and discuss those with your child's doctor. Travis wouldn't be receiving his current treatment if I didn't go to a conference, listen to others' stories, and then bring that information back to his next appointment. As I educate myself, I make sure to share that information with Travis in age-appropriate information, and I've been doing that since he was as young as possible. They're never too young to have an understanding of what's going on in their bodies. I would suggest finding a support group either in person or online. In 2007, the only readily available information was that 1.5-page printout. So I found a group on Yahoo, and we shared the minimal information we had through that resource. I was able to find out about conferences, research, and doctors who are specializing in his condition. I've encouraged doctors to speak with Travis when they're asking questions and doing their exams, as soon as he was old enough to answer those questions. You can add information if something is missed, but this helps to empower your child to give them a voice in their own care. It may feel as though it is happening to you, but remember, it's really happening to your child. They have to withstand the pokes, the imaging, the tests, and the treatments. It all happens directly to their bodies. They are the ones who have to live with the decisions made now, which is why you should have a say in what's being done. When Travis was younger, we'd talk with him about the options and why I felt my choice was the best choice at that time. As he has gotten older, I share the options for care and we discuss the pros and cons, and he tells me what he thinks is best. Then I share my thoughts on what I feel is best. But at the end of the discussion, it's his decision. Even being here today was his decision. Travis is in charge of his health care. We discuss options as they arise, and in most cases, he decides what he's feeling best. This empowerment will help him be a successful advocate for himself as he gets older. As children get older, it's important that you help them build their own support system with others from the rare disease community and others who have their disorder. Travis participates in support group calls when he can and speaks openly with adults who have the same disorder. They truly know what he is going through and can help him learn from their experiences. You need to be willing to have honest conversations with your child, and sometimes that means being the voice of unfortunate reason. I never use the words, "you can't do that." Instead, I'll ask questions. Have you thought about if this is something that is feasible long-term? As Travis entered high school, we've started to discuss career options. I've always been a fan of do something that you love that allows you to pay your bills and enjoy life. But with Travis, it's also important that he has health insurance. Travis enjoys cutting our grass and was interested in possibly starting his own landscaping company. We discussed that for many adults with PKD, when they reach 35 to 40 years old, they suffer from severe fatigue that requires many to go on disability. We discussed the fact that this could happen to him and if he thought about how that might affect his career choice. My job is not to have him get through his childhood. It is to raise him to be a successful adult with a rare disease. Having a child with a rare disease can be difficult and unexpected, but it's manageable. As Travis gets older, I worry about him having to maintain health insurance as an adult, and even with the health insurance, the expenses that he may incur because insurance chooses not to cover those costs. Will he be able to get complete life insurance plan without having to pay a ridiculous premium? I don't only have to worry about the care and medications Travis receives today. I need to worry that he'll have access and affordability in care later in life, because the medications and treatments mean nothing without accessibility. I hope that the advances in PK deficiency research will continue to be made and that he is given the opportunity to have a normal life that doesn't revolve around treatment, medications, and side effects that can vary from day to day and aren't always connected to his hemoglobin like we've previously thought. But either way, I'm confident and trust that he has the knowledge and resources to make the decisions that are right for him.
As my mom said, my name is Travis. I'm 15 years old and I have PKD. And I've had PKD my entire life. I don't know what life is like to not have PKD, but I don't feel as though my life would be much different than it is now if I didn't have PKD. I get very great treatment and it works. I don't even think about the fact that I have PKD that much. Yeah, I have it and stuff. It affects me, no doubt about it. That's why I get red blood cell exchange transfusions. But it just doesn't feel like I have PKD. I feel normal. I had my first port placed when I was about 8 months old. My port allowed us to schedule regular transfusions every 4 to 5 weeks. At 5.5 years old, I had a splenectomy before starting school. It was then that we stopped my transfusions and moved to maintenance checkups with hematology. My ferritin spiked when we stopped transfusions, and I began JADNU for iron chelation. We decided to return to transfusions when I was about 7.5 years old in 2015, after my mom attending an advisory board meeting. Within several months, we began discussing changing to exchange blood transfusions. Dr. Sprins suggested apheresis to remove only the RBC from my body and return my plasma and WBC with new donor red blood cells. She saw this treatment as working together with JADNU. With JADNU, I was still taking for iron overload, rather than against it like a simple transfusion would. Because of the extra RBC that are introduced and left up to the body to eliminate, within several months of restarting transfusions, we decided to attempt the exchange transfusions and found that my original port was not sufficient to deal with the high flow of the exchange. We scheduled to have my original port removed and replaced with a high flow double lumen port around 9 years old. The double lumen port made the exchange blood transfusions easier. We moved to New Hampshire a few months later, and I continued to receive red blood cell transfusions at Dartmouth Health in Lebanon, New Hampshire. When we started the exchange transfusions, they were performed every 4 weeks, and I received 5 units of blood because of my weight. As I grew, we increased the length of time between each visit and the volume of red blood cells being received. We increased from 4 to 6 weeks, and we realized that 6 weeks was too long for me at the time. We adjusted to every 5 weeks, then from 5 to 6, and about 6 months ago, we increased from 6 to 8 week intervals. My healthcare team continues to monitor my growth and increase the number of units received with each transfusion as needed. Currently, I receive 9 units of blood during each transfusion, and we recently discontinued pre-meds for transfusions. To be honest, I don't even see PKD as a negative. I'm good friends with my nurses and doctors, so I just have a good time and talk and stuff while I get the transfusion done. I should also mention that I got my double lumen port removed because I outgrew it and chose not to replace the port. Now we do the transfusions peripherally. One 18-gauge needle in the crease of my left arm and an IV, usually in my right forearm, so that I can bend at least one arm. I don't have major side effects to getting exchange transfusions. The biggest side effect that affects me is that I am most definitely tired after the procedure. Another quantitative side effect that we have noticed is a spike in potassium levels, known as hyperkalemia, which causes me to feel nauseous within a few hours of my completed transfusion. This is partially caused by the rapid intravenous transfusion, and may be compounded by the increased potassium in stored red blood cells. This can vary depending on where the stored blood is during their storage life cycle. The older blood, the higher the potassium levels. My potassium levels return to normal within 24 hours, and Zofran is given post-transfusion to help control my nausea. For the first time in my life, my lab work is consistent, and my ferritin is in the normal range. For the future, I would like to see a broader standard of care normalized for the PKD community. All of us are affected differently, and I am proof that different types of care can and do work to minimize the side effects and secondary conditions associated with PKD. A typical day in my life is normal, at least to me. If it were a weekday, Monday through Friday, I would wake up, take a shower, get ready for school, come home, do homework if I have any, then do whatever I'm in the mood to do. Get ready for bed, go to bed, repeat the next day. However, on a weekend, I would wake up either between 8 and 10, between 8 and 10, or around 12 in the afternoon. Get out of bed, make food, take a shower if needed, and then do whatever I would like to do for that day, because I don't really have a routine for the weekend. I just wake up and do what I would like to do unless we have plans. On a transfusion day, which is mostly on Fridays, unless their other patient who gets the same apheresis treatment has their appointment scheduled for the same day we would go, then we would go on Wednesday. I would wake up around 7, pack some stuff to bring to entertain myself while we're there, leave the house around 8 so we can be on time for my appointment at 9:45. We arrive around 9:30, check into the hospital. They get my height and weight, draw labs from an IV in my right forearm. Then we wait up for about an hour and a half for the labs and the blood bank. Then around 11:30 to 12-ish, they come with my blood. My blood gets checked. Then they put an 18-gauge needle in the crease of my left arm. Then they connect the lines from the machine to my needle and IV. Connect one of the 9 bags of blood, then start the exchange. That itself takes about as long as a normal blood transfusion. Then we're done at around 2 p.m. We leave the hospital, then go home around 4. I do also take Zofran at the hospital so I don't get sick when I get home because my potassium levels spike, but that's normal. Then I go to bed later that night and wake up the next day and get back on my normal schedule. It was interesting to learn about the different treatments that are in different stages of testing and trials at the Thrive conference in November of 2022. I feel as though my PKD is well managed right now, but I also understand that I may not be able to always receive this treatment. Having options to decide from to help manage my care will hopefully make my life easier as I enter adulthood. I don't want to always have to worry about the financial burden of having a rare chronic disease, as well as whether I have insurance or what happens if I lose it. I want to become an RN and work as an apheresis nurse so that I can help people who are going through what I have had to go through. Having treatments that will help to keep my energy levels higher as I age will hopefully allow me to have a long, meaningful career. I don't want to have to retire or go on disability because my body is not capable of doing what I want to continue doing.
Thank you both for sharing your story. I'd like to open it up to questions. If there are questions in the audience, please do step up to the mic. And while everyone decides whether or not they're going to ask questions, I can maybe kick it off. One of the things that is always a recurring theme, whether it's with PKD or with quite literally any other rare disease, is the advocacy that a parent needs to really engage in on behalf of their child. Can you maybe share an experience or two where you've really had to advocate for Travis?
So I had one very recently with genetic testing of all things. We're in the process of trying to get Travis his official genetic testing so we can understand exactly which pyruvate kinase or PKLR enzymes are deficient. And there is free testing available through a program called Anemia ID. And when I mentioned it to the genetic counselor, I was told that that was unethical to have to put a child or a non-adult with and test them for things that may not present until adulthood. I wrote a very chosen letter in response, partially saying the fact that as a parent of a child with a rare disease, I know exactly what it feels like to not know what's wrong with your child. And I can tell you that not knowing is far worse than knowing and being able to prepare yourself. So I discussed with his hematologist, who was prepared to request for the genetic testing through Anemia ID. Her only reserve was that because we are interested in some of the potential treatments that are in trials, whether that would potentially disqualify him if we found out he also had another type of anemia as well as pyruvate kinase deficiency, because it is more common than we'd like to think that people have more than one type of anemia that is present. So I got my tail tucked under my legs and I respectfully apologized for causing such big huff and puff. I still think I was right, but that's okay. And just requested that we just do the PKLR testing, so that way we can at least know exactly what mutations he carries.
So before I ask a question, I just want to say, Jessica, Michelle, the fact that you're doing this, right, of being a parent who cares and empowering your kids to be their best selves, find solutions. You have other kids you're, helping raise as well. That's incredible. Where do you get the courage, and how are you doing it all together? And what can be done to make it even easier for you to be a caregiver and have that balance?
I think that most parents of any child that has a chronic disease will say you just charge through. Trying to make all of their lives the best that they can be. From your child who has chronic issues to your children who you don't want them to feel left out because of the attention that your other child gets. So you just push through and you find a support system, whether that's family or friends or other people that are dealing with the same disorder or other rare diseases, and you create that support system so that way you don't have the weight all on your shoulders.
Thank you for being amazing role models. Seriously, thank you.
You know, actually, I think this mom might be listening online right now, but a couple of weeks ago, I received a call from a mom who has a 5-year-old little boy with PKD. Unfortunately, he's incredibly severe. He used to have transfusions every 4 weeks, and now he's getting them every 3 weeks. Mom has been in tears about what it is that she can do and look forward to in the future. I know that you've had a lot of ups and downs too, Jessica, with Travis's PKD. What would you say, you know, looking back at Travis at 5 years old? What hope, what things can you tell this mom?
When Travis was 5 years old, I was literally told there would be no therapy or treatment within his lifetime. That anything that was discovered or researched right now would be beneficial to his children or grandchildren. And I can tell you in 10 years, there has been more research and more treatment options for pyruvate kinase deficiency than I expected to have in his lifetime and beyond. So I would say it just needs to be managed and look at it as a manageable condition and figure out how his specific severity of PKD has to be managed. And that is your normal for now. And as treatments become more readily available, that normal can change. And just be willing to understand that today is not forever, and that even tomorrow is not forever. It will constantly be changing throughout his life, and to work with his doctors and educate yourself, most importantly, and have those difficult conversations sometimes about different treatment options that you even hear other patients having that maybe aren't considered a standard of care that we don't have in the pyruvate kinase deficiency yet. I know it's in the works. But you will get through this, and just to lean on your support system. There are lots of parents who have gone through this, are going through this, and we find strength in numbers. And that's how we combat this rare disorder, is by being a community of many.
Any other questions? Oh, I see Karen.
People will learn, don't put me near a microphone. So Travis, thank you very much, and Jessica for sharing your story and your journey with us. You mentioned being on an iron chelator, so I'm kind of curious, and any question I ask, if you think it's too personal, you don't have to answer. I'm curious about what sort of side effects you might be having from that. And then you mentioned that you're satisfied at the moment with your current treatment with the transfusions. I'm wondering what impact COVID had on that, and did that start to give you pause to think about maybe something else that you would want in a different treatment option?
I don't think the Jade knew.
He's no longer on Jade New. He
Oh,
was on
great.
Jade
Yeah.
New up until about
A lot.
2019, maybe.
Yeah. My iron levels are normal now. And COVID didn't affect the treatment too much. It only limited one person to go to the hospital with me to get it done. Just had to wear a mask the whole time, but it didn't make me not able to get the treatment.
Great.
We're fortunate that our hospital system has a strong blood bank and blood donor program.
Yep.
So there was never an issue for him that there was a blood shortage. There are many other patients that live in various parts of the country and the world that do suffer from accessibility to readily available, clean, and safe donor blood. So we, as a community, are always encouraging everybody to donate when possible, and look forward to the strides that are being made even in blood donors and pathogen removal and potentially, I know that there's also blood products that are going to be man-made versus man-made. So we're always looking at those as positives to help with continued treatment and maintenance. Travis has said he goes in for his oil change every 8 weeks.
So can you feel as you're approaching those 8 weeks that you need a transfusion, or do you feel pretty even in between?
I feel pretty even in between.
That's great.
The only time that I ever was like, oh yeah, I need a transfusion, was when we went to Florida, because we were just doing so many things back to back every day. So that wore me down, but no, most of the, I feel consistent, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you again. I'll talk to you
Thank
more
you.
at lunch. I have a few more questions.
I have a question for Travis. You said earlier when you were talking that you typically have a pretty typical schedule for a teenage kid, but have you ever felt that there were any things that you couldn't do or restrictions on your life because of this disorder?
Main sports, maybe. I played basketball when I was younger, but I never really did a sport just because I would get winded like within 5 minutes or so of doing it, especially basketball because it's running up and down the court. But other than that, I think that's the only thing that I felt like I couldn't do to an extent.
Well, I just want to thank Jessica and Travis for taking the time out of their days to come and share their story with us. Thank you so much.